Have you ever been so immersed in something that you're doing that perhaps when someone tries to talk to you to give you some instructions or tell you something about their day, you suddenly can't remember, what did they just say? Although you thought you were multitasking, you were passively listening and actively focusing your attention on something else. And in today's culture, it is so true that we try to hustle and do as much as we possibly can to squeeze in tasks within our day. But in reality, multitasking as you know it does not exist. In short, there's no such thing as truly multitasking, that is, the act of performing 2 or more tasks simultaneously at once with enough focus and attention to properly and effectively do them all. Try to think of it more as a juggling act, where the tasks that you're trying to do are the balls that you're juggling, and this will result in either dropping one of them or not completing the task performing at your optimum level. This is because you have one attention span. When you divide your focus, it obviously does not give 100% of that focus divided evenly, but rather it is literally divided. While you may think that your brain is simultaneously performing all of these tasks at once when you try to multitask, in reality, your brain is toggling between them, and you have to allow your brain a moment or two to switch those gears and adjust to the new task that you're setting out to do. A better interpretation of multitasking is task switching, which, because it obviously results in the lack of quality in another task that we do, the best way to think of it is opposites attract. According to some research done by David Burkus, try to pair up a mentally challenging or more stimulating task with one that requires a little less energy and focus, that you're okay if your full attention is not given and you're slightly slacking in that area. For example, if you are focusing on exercising but you have music or podcast playing in the background, your full attention might not be given to the content of the podcast or even the song you're listening to, but you're still doing something productive while multitasking at the same time. Now, you might be wondering, what does multitasking have to do with memory? It makes sense that if you're trying to remember something that someone said, then obviously multitasking would hinder your ability to remember that. But what happens if you're doing tasks that don't seem to require any sense of memory recollection? What's wrong with performing 2 tasks, even if you don't end up remembering every detail of it? Well, the reality of the situation is that over time, if you're constantly toggling between tasks and switching gears without giving your brain enough time to adjust, fully focus and absorb the information and process of what you're doing, then this can start to wear on your long-term and short-term memory building ability, especially concerning your working memory. Now, your working memory is the information that you hold at the forefront of your brain. It's kind of like a mental sticky note that holds it there temporarily until you're done using it, pretty much. So an example of this is an instruction that someone gives you or directions to the grocery store. You remember it for a temporary amount of time, and once it's no longer needed or relevant, you typically just discard it and throw it in the little trash bin in your mental headspace. It's kind of like a note to self. While your working memory plays a huge role in your short-term memory storage, it also has an impact in organizing the information for long-term memory storage. Because the amount of time that we spend absorbing something before it's encoded and put into our short or long-term memory storage, it makes sense that if we're constantly switching between tasks and not giving our full attention, then our brain's ability to fully remember will start to wear down because we're not exercising that ability. The old saying, either use it or lose it, definitely applies here. You're essentially spreading your attention span across all of these tasks that take away from the time and significance placed in those memories. It will likely enter your working memory, but most likely pass on through because there's nothing keeping it there. There's no active recall and nothing that's giving it a reason to stay and actively be used for a certain purpose. So first, understanding how memories work is huge for being able to apply strategies in retaining things better and ultimately improving your memory. Now, there are 3 steps in the process of building a memory. Now, this is encoding, storage, and retrieval. So you're going to want to think of encoding as the first step in the process of retaining a memory. This step is very important because it essentially lays the foundation for how a memory is going to be stored, as well as how long it's going to be stored for. Now, one super important thing when building a memory is the encoding process. And it's during this phase where you're going to want to pay attention and make meaningful connections to the information in order for your brain to really soak it up and add it to its network of information so that your memory stays longer. Because memory retrieval is basically the activation of certain nodes of information within the network of your brain, what's going to happen is that when you connect a piece of information to something meaningful to you, it's going to add it to its network where it recalls something much more easily based on a kind of network of association. For example, the color red, that is perceived as a node of information in your brain, and other things that are red, such as a fire truck or an apple, those are all associated in the network of your brain, so that when a certain trigger causes you to recall something red, your brain automatically thinks of other things that are red based on their associated grouping and placing within your brain. And this leads us to the importance that you make it meaningful. Have you ever wondered why it's possible for us to remember every single lyric of a 3-minute song, yet some of us can't even remember what we ate for breakfast? It is highly important during the process of memory building that we make sure that information is fully encoded. The quality in which something was encoded will determine how deeply and easily you remember it. Some ways to help the encoding process along is not just to passively retain the information, but you want to further build on something that is meaningful to you. It's scientifically proven that if we make something meaningful and have to actively recall and use that piece of information, then we're going to have a much easier time remembering it and recalling it, using it. One great option that could help aid in this process is using mnemonic devices. Not those kind of devices. Now, these could include jingles, songs, rhymes, acronyms, memory by association, or even chunking, which is where you group different pieces of large-scale information into smaller, more manageable, and meaningful bits of information. If you take a step back and think, how is it possible for us to remember all 26 letters of the alphabet? The alphabet song, how is it that some of us learned different grammatical rules or things within a language? Acronyms, jingles, all of that stuff really helps with retaining and remembering that information because it makes it fun and meaningful to you, so the encoding process is much more efficient and thorough. Even if you don't end up reciting these pieces of information as in a jingle or song form, as most of us probably know the alphabet well enough to just speak it. It was the learning process that made these tactics and methods so useful and important. In addition to this, when forming memories, try to remember that timing is everything. In our productivity culture, we are conditioned to think that all-nighters constitute productivity and ultimately being successful and hardworking. While it may be true that there comes a point in time where you have to spend all night working on something, the reality of the situation is that you need rest in order for your memories to fully process and go through the encoding cycle efficiently and thoroughly. But especially for those students out there, you need your rest in order for those pieces of information that you spent so much time studying to fully be retained in your brain if you want to remember any of the information. If you've seen the trending topic of pulling all-nighters on social media, let me tell you right now, all-nighters are not cool. They are sleep deprivation at best and will not do you any favors. Now, this holds true for anyone, even if you're not a student, because it is actually scientifically proven that sleep locks in our retention of the information that we're exposed to. It's almost as if your subconscious mind is still processing it while you're resting, which makes the timing of working on your tasks, if you want to study and remember them, very important. So taking time and studying a little bit before going to bed, or even taking a power nap throughout the day after a chunk of studying will really go a long way to boost your memory and retention of that information. Yes, I'm giving you permission to take a nap. Even just taking little 5-minute breaks throughout the day, this will go a long way in your brain's ability to stay sharp throughout the day and retain the information you're trying to study. Exercise and good time management will go a long way as well, because you won't push yourself to the point of having to cram or pull an all-nighter, because if you want to really lock in your ability to remember things, then you want to avoid all of these last-minute strategies as much as possible. Because if you rush through your brain's ability to retain this information, it won't mean anything in the long run, and you're just spinning your wheels at this point. And that leads me to the last point of advice I have for you, and that is to take note. We often try to do it all and remember everything without any sort of difficulty. We say, nah, I've got it, and in reality, oftentimes we don't got it. So I challenge you to not be afraid to write things down. This is so important, because even people with the best of memory and memory retention write things down. Don't see it as a sign of weakness, but actually as a sign of great intelligence. Because in the grand scheme of life, it is much less embarrassing to whip out a pen and paper than it is to face the reality of a missed deadline. So don't try to be Superman, we're human. And you may find that by writing something down, it almost gives a sense of accountability, where you might not even have to even reference the note that you made, but something about writing it down, especially by hand, will result in better memory retention, so that it'll decrease the chance of you actually forgetting it. This form of writing things down could also be applied in other methods too, such as setting a reminder or an alarm to do a certain task, and this sense of accountability will train your brain to kind of be thinking ahead on its own without the need to directly reference that note that you made. It'll kind of transcript the physical note that you made into a mental note, which will go a long way in your ability to remember. And with that, you know what? With this video, I hope that it was informative and interesting. I hope that you were able to learn a few things. With fall finally approaching, hopefully, get out there and enjoy the pretty weather if it's pretty where you are. And with that, I would greatly appreciate it if you want to like this video and subscribe to join the network of growth that we're building here. It's my honor and privilege to have each and every one of you here, so thank you for joining this platform. I'll see you very soon, and until next time, stay smiling. Storage is where your brain retains a piece of information for a certain... But what happens when you're doing tasks that don't require any sort of memory recollection or... Storage is where your brain retains the information for a certain amount of time, whether that's long-term or short term. Who wants a free shirt?